right, this is the last panel of the day, and it's going to be a debate, so it's going to be super fun. Make sure you pay attention because I will be asking you if our debaters missed anything at the end. So we've touched on the need for privacy in America, the problems introduced by Web 2, and how Web 3 can begin to address some of those challenges. But we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for Satoshi Nakamoto. So the white paper released over more than a decade ago paved a way for all of us to be here today talking about these innovative technologies. And this debate is going to beg the question, if Satoshi had ZK, would he have implemented it into the Bitcoin network? I will obviously be moderating the debate, and I'm joined on stage by some familiar faces and some new ones. Aleo Foundation's Alex Pruden. He is against, right?
Yeah, I'm anti.
Anti. We got an anti over here. O1 Lab CEO Brandon Case, who is for. Galaxy Digital Principal Yi Tong, who is also for, and co-founder of ZKM, Ming Guo.
Yes.
Who is against. All right, are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Ready?
Let's do this.
Ready? Bring your A game. Get that attitude. Get that sass, because we are doing it. Ready? Okay. Alex, I'm going to start with you. If Satoshi had ZK, would the Bitcoin network look differently today?
Yes, it would absolutely look differently today, but I don't think Satoshi would have implemented ZK in Bitcoin. I think Satoshi had a very simple goal in creating Bitcoin. I mean, the Bitcoin white paper is 6 pages long or 7 pages long, and all he was trying to solve was a decentralized peer-to-peer payment system. And I think introducing something as complex as zero-knowledge cryptography, I think takes away from the principles that he was trying to achieve, which is namely simplicity. And in addition, it opens up a number of other cans of worms around security, right? So one of the issues around security actually came up in Zcash. There was a bug in Zcash that, in fact, no one knows if it was exploited or not ever. It was, there was an inflation bug. So could there be a billion Zcash? Is there, only the 21 million Zcash? Who knows, right? And I think Satoshi very much wanted a sound monetary system, and without proof that you have only a limited number of token supply and the transparency that enabled that, that proof, that real-time credibility, I don't think he would have used ZK.
All right, you guys are going to have a chance to rebuttal in just a moment, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to make your opening argument now. Brandon, we're going to start with you. Why is Alex wrong?
Well, it makes sense. Satoshi wanted to make something simple, but Satoshi wanted to be anonymous. The anonymity was so important to the early Bitcoin folks that we to this day still don't know who Satoshi is. And I'll wait.
And I'll tell you one more thing.
I'll wait to rebut, but I have something prepared. Or I can just go into it.
Go into it.
I'll go into it. So even if ZK was in Bitcoin, which I think Satoshi would have done, had the maturity of our industry been the way it is now, then. You follow me?
Yeah.
But maybe the total amount of currency is transparent. Maybe there's transparency at the base layer. In Mina, if I were to shill, we have ZK tightly integrated into our chain, but we keep transparency at the base layer, and that's something Bitcoin could have done too, but still allowed certain extra privacy and anonymity features if ZK were in Bitcoin.
Okay, I'm going a little bit off the cuff here, so stay with me, Alex. I'm going to let you respond, but first I want to get your voice in here. Sure. Ming, you are on Alex's team. What do you think of what Brandon just said?
Right. I think the anonymity argument is a little bit misguided. I think Satoshi don't want total privacy. He wanted a transparent blockchain system. And also, this is a mechanism for you against the establishment. If you're total private, then there's less transparency out there, right? companies then close up their books, right? This blockchain would just be nothing than a data center or database, right? So he wants more than that. And then also, if Satoshi is watching all of the drama that happened, afterwards, then I'm pretty sure he's still watching this. That's my belief.
Yeah. He might be in
now.
this room right
Yes.
now. He or
Satoshi,
she.
can you just
Hello.
stand up? Surprise.
Yes, and yes, please do. I'm glad to shake your hand. With just anonymity that can be tracked, right? Force you never expose yourself into the traditional fiat. Just totally using blockchain, right? That way, there's anonymity wouldn't hurt you. So I think Satoshi would still be implementing Bitcoin as it is today. He wouldn't want a total privacy system.
Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say there's two other. So I think echoing the point that Satoshi's priority was permissionlessness, and he wanted to empower individuals against large, centralized authorities. I mean, that's why in the first Bitcoin block, there's the headline from the the London Times or whatever about the British bank failures in 2009, and that was his primary motivation. And I think another big issue with introducing ZK is you tend to, because zero knowledge tends to be very computationally expensive, you introduce a paradigm which is quite common in rollups today, for example, where only a single party can generate the proofs, or maybe a handful of special parties that require data centers potentially to do this economically. And I think that's very antithetical to the ideals that Satoshi had. I think Satoshi embraced the idea that every individual person had equal power in the system. And I think in the way that zero knowledge is often implemented, and particularly around some more complex systems like that, it generally bottlenecks proving around a limited subset of actors, which is antithetical to Satoshi's values, in my view.
Yeah, I want to bring you into the conversation here. Back up your teammate there. Why are what these two are saying? Why is that maybe not the case for you?
I wouldn't specifically call Bitcoin economical to begin with. And then, so I think that we touch on different projects. I do believe in the vision where ultimately in the beginning it was all about having a permissionless blockchain, and then it's about P2P even messaging. And I think that is still the case. That's the ethos of the project. However, I feel like if zero knowledge proof were as accessible as it is today, comparatively to 2008, I think there would have been some integration. I don't think it's going to be a binary total public or total private. I think it's going to be element of ZK enabled elements. So for example, would you say that rollup has completely changed the direction of the Ethereum? I think it's still part of the Ethereum roadmap, and I think that's kind of the direction how we approach scaling. And I think that if zero knowledge was available, I think it's potentially possible part of the, for example, transaction recipient sender, the details of it partially could be obfuscated, it could be optional, and then it doesn't have to be completely public. And I think on the scaling side, I think with zero knowledge proof, we all can agree that the block size will be way smaller, and then so state size will be a lot more easy to manage. And then so in that sense that you are able to offload a lot more compute off-chain so that you only are storing the Bitcoin, I guess, you're only storing the proof of computation on Bitcoin block space. So that makes the block space already scarce, but more valuable. So in the sense that, for example, we have project like Citria, like ZK Rollup on Bitcoin, they talk about using Bitcoin mainly as a verifiability layer. And I think that is still a great vision that doesn't deviate from the original Bitcoin vision. And I think that is still very interesting. And it is still, it's a robust platform that people can continuously build upon and evolve, and it doesn't have to stay at the exact same state as 2008.
Brendan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing that I'd add is, you could use recursive proofs like in Mina to have a succinct blockchain. No,
Brendan, one more time. And
sorry, no. I do have something to add. With respect to the idea around, maybe privacy wasn't the goal, it was anonymity. And when you're in Bitcoin, when you already have Bitcoin, then yeah, you can move around and you're just you follow the UTXOs and all you do is like see what addresses you touch, whatever, right? But how do you get capital into Bitcoin? And that's something where ZK really helps getting money from the traditional finance system into the Web3 world. And that's something that I really believe that Satoshi would have been a huge fan of, and is necessary to achieve those goals of anonymity.
All right, we're moving into responses and closing arguments, and then we'll open up the floor. Ming, I know that I'm going to let everyone in on something here. Ming was flip-flopping before we started this debate. Have you been turned to the other side? Is it only going to be Alex over here by the end of this debate?
I'm not scared.
Yes, I'm conflicted. What I'm doing is try to bring the masses and their capital, to be sharing Bitcoin's security and the most valuable chain in the world. That's I'm doing. My project is doing. But on the other hand, I think Satoshi has an argument. I think that I very much agree on is that he wants Bitcoin or blockchain in general to be a self-contained, self-sustainable, decentralized economy. He wouldn't want outsider normal world finance to pollute it, corrupt it. So in that way, I think he built it in a way that he deliberately crippled the smart contract system on Bitcoin, make it totally incomplete to prevent that. There's I'm conflicted because I wanted to build a smart contract engine ready to build a layer 2 rollup on Bitcoin. Right now, we're trying to figure out a way. There are ways, but if Satoshi had implemented this, it will make life much easier, right? Just add an opcode that we all wanted. But he deliberately not implement that for this very reason, which I actually, from political, economic point of view, I agree. I don't want the big boys, the big government, to pollute, to corrupt us. So, for that matter, I think the future will be a kind of like a struggle between these two. These two different influences. But I think the users will benefit from this because technology will evolve to make decentralized Web3, all these new generation of apps that Satoshi might not have imagined. He's probably watching all this with amazed, That's my answer.
And I would maybe add to that and say, look, I think there's other ways to get privacy and anonymity. And in fact, I think the Bitcoin ecosystem was kind of initially proposed this concept of confidential transactions that spawned a project that failed spectacularly, but is kind of a fun memory for cryptos. Anyone remember Grin? No one remembers Grin. Well, it's worth just looking up. Mimblewimble was the protocol. Grin was one of the implementations of it. But anyway, so Grin uses a different form of cryptography called bulletproofs. It's not, I guess, depending on how you define ZK, it could be ZK. So
it's ZK.
I'll take the other side of that debate. But no, anyway, I think importantly, there's other approaches where you can get privacy. And I think the simplicity of the layer 1 is what Satoshi wanted to preserve, which is understandable as if you think about adding additional assumptions comes with costs. And I think the roll-up point and recursive proofs is a good example. A recursive proof generation process often requires is typically assumed to run where proofs can be aggregated. So typically proofs are not aggregated at the level of the client. They're aggregated at some server level that is then aggregating proofs together and then posting a single proof, that's the point of the aggregation and the recursion, onto a blockchain. And I think the cost of that is now you have there's a third party that's part of that system, right? And the reason to even do these recursive proofs is to save block space, because in many cases, certainly if you're talking about the world of Stark proofs, but even Stark proofs, these things can in some cases range up to hundreds of kilobytes or even megabytes in size. And we think for those who were around in 2017 probably remember the block size debates in Bitcoin. Like going from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes was a schism that basically fractured the community at that point. And so I think, again, back to the earlier point, I think Satoshi's vision was to make as egalitarian a system as possible and as sustainable as a system as possible, because in his view, that was what would empower individuals against a broader system.
Go for it.
I'm so sorry, but you teed me up too much, Alex. I have to
You
say
have
it.
one. You only got one left.
It's my last. It's my no. You know, you don't need to have a separate service that's centralized or even decentralized outside of the protocol to be aggregating and recursively composing proofs. And in fact, on Mina, which has been in mainnet since 2021, with payments, and you know, we're smart contracts coming soon. We have had this this sort of system as part of the protocol and powered by you know, everyday people running the network. So so I just had to rebut that.
It's a debate, so you know, it's understandable.
Bring us home.
I would like to say, I personally think it doesn't matter if he or she wanted ZK at all. With the design, we didn't go back to in time with a time machine, but given right now, ZK, it is in fact a lot more accessible. Verification costs, generation time, it's way faster, way cheaper. It is coming to Bitcoin. So it has, and then it's gonna make it could, like you wanted Bitcoin to be an open permissionless network that's egalitarian, whatnot, very idealistic, or even potentially, you know, trying to be an independent financial system, want nothing to do with anything else. And you know, we as a utopian like world use our own internet fake money, but at the same time, like it has made. Like Bitcoin has evolved into something that you could actually use it as a data availability layer. You can use it as simply verification. People are going to use it for whatever it's possible. And then there are different techniques, not even just ZK. I mean, there are many cryptographic technique that can come to it. It can enable Bitcoin base layer, but it's not going to change what it is originally. That's my take.
Who knows? Maybe Satoshi is working on Citria and yeah, maybe. All right. Any questions for our panelists? Then we're going to open it up to the audience. Are there any points that you think our for folks or our against folks missed? This is your chance to get in on the debate. Don't everybody look so excited.
Yeah. And we have a microphone.
Satoshi gave an order.
I mean, I think it's very complicated, right? Like, it was a very novel idea at the time, and I think you're absolutely right that I think accessibility was the point, right? Like, I think the permissionlessness was maybe the first thing, but I also think that, you know, I'm a big believer that people, even deep anons, don't exist in a vacuum. And I do think that Satoshi was hanging out with a lot of cypherpunks, and I do think that, you know, ZK is very sexy to cypherpunks. So I think probably to some extent or another, depending on how practical it was, depending on how feasible it would be for a truly decentralized network to run those kind of proofs, probably there would have been some kind of ZK component to it, yes. That's kind of my take. I don't know that that's a question per se.
No, it's good. I just like, you know, he did say in the beginning that I was right. I just want you to know that, Brandon.
Anyway, that's kind of my whole thing. I spent a lot of time in Boulder growing up, and I knew a lot of people in the cypherpunk community, so to speak. And I do think that, you know, even deeply idealistic technologists want to impress their friends. That's kind of the point that I want to make, I suppose. So yeah, riff on that if you like.
Should we do reactions? Yeah,
Do a reaction, and we'll have people form their thoughts while you're doing a reaction.
Okay, so I guess I'm just going to riff on it. I guess maybe this is a little bit orthogonal to the, you know, to the, like the, would Satoshi integrate it or not? But I think it is important to note that every ecosystem organically grows in different directions. Actually, as we were talking about this debate, I mean, one thing, the most recent innovation that's come to Bitcoin is this concept of ordinals. Is anyone familiar with ordinals? It's kind of like, I guess, NFTs on Bitcoin is maybe the simple way to describe it. And for anyone who's close to the Bitcoin community, it's actually been very controversial, right? Are ordinals a good thing? Yeah, is this good? Like, do we want this to have any more functionality than the most basic thing? And the reality is, kind of the consequence rather of Satoshi building a permissionless system is that kind of doesn't matter when anyone thinks, like, they're there, right? And so it's kind of just a fact that these things organically evolve over time and no one can stop them. And that's one of the, I think, cool things about a truly decentralized permissionless system.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. And just to add, like, I know, like, a few of us up here have already mentioned, like, ways in which we'll just ignore what Satoshi would have wanted or not, because you know, we want to put ZK on Bitcoin, and it's something that also, like, at OM Labs and Mina we're thinking a lot about, and we'll have some news soon too. Just had to tease that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
Where can we find more information? No, sure.
Wait a few days.
Yeah, I'm actually, yeah, and now I'm going to flip over.
Make
It
flips.
was inevitable.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm ZKM. And I can't just not doing ZK over like a Bitcoin. So I'm putting it over. But let me just say this: it's like history. Like you go to Egypt, you saw all those monuments and all that. And actually, archaeologists have been discovering that there are different stages of civilization. That you see Ramses, he had all his like markings, but probably not on the kind of stones like he carved out by his like the people out his era. It's probably from a very early civilization. So I think we're doing the same thing. Like we make we can't just not do anything, right? Well, so we inscribe. We use the Bitcoin as a DA layer, right? And then we build rollups. ZK VM over Bitcoin. That's what our project's doing. So we put a lot of ZK over on top of Bitcoin. So I'm sorry, Satoshi, but this is what I'm really doing. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're ever going to say anything, Satoshi, you better do it now.
Now's your chance.
Now's the
Yeah.
time. All right, we have another question or comment here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to recall, thinking back to when I first got into this, I remember that it seemed like there was sort of this expectation that everyone would run a full node wallet. And if that was the expectation, that it was going to be decentralized in that way, that everyone who's participating is running a full node, then it would seem sort of unrealistic to include ZK in that. So that seemed to be my recollection. That would be a vote to a simpler design.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because in practice, that's not what most people do, in fact, do for Bitcoin. And I think this goes back to what Satoshi wanted versus what people do. And it's interesting because without a mechanism to enforce that in the protocol, like it's difficult. And there's a piece that I recommend everyone read. It's an essay by the founder of Signal. I can't remember his name right now, but he wrote a very famous piece about why he was not bullish on Web3. And it was basically this exact point. He said in Web 1, everybody was supposed to run their own SMTP servers, and everyone just wanted Gmail. And that's why we ended up with Google, basically. And he says, and his point is like, Satoshi is naive to believe that everyone will run their own full node. But on the flip side, I think if you take that argument to the extreme, what is the point of a blockchain? If you're just going to take someone's word for it, why pay the obscene energy cost to secure the Bitcoin blockchain? Is that justifiable? If at the end of the day, we all in this room collectively don't run full nodes, and I think it's obviously easy to scale a system when you make compromises around the assumptions on what people are going to do with it or what infrastructure they're going to run. But at some point you cross a line at which point the whole thing just fails to even make sense anymore based on its original logic.
Founder of Signal, Moxie.
Moxie, thank you. Moxie Marlinspike.
I totally agree with you that yes, Satoshi wanted people to run full nodes, and it's important for people to run full nodes. But as both of you were saying, like, it's important that users just get what they want easily. And actually, God, sorry, this is all I
switching
know. I work
sides?
on Mina for like 7 years. I don't know anything else.
I can feel the energy of you wanting to run a Mina-like client on my Apple Watch right now.
So sorry, I have to. You can go try this today. OpenMina.com. There's a demo. Mina full nodes can be transparently run on your mobile phone in a browser because of the recursive snarks. And in fact, to my knowledge,
What is a full node?
Yeah,
I think we have to, this is an important point to linger on, because what is a full node?
Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. Let's talk about it. In my definition, a full node means that you have complete, absolute, verifiable belief, but it's like a true belief. I don't know what the word is. That the data that you're seeing is what is sort of correct without trusting anyone, and you can process transactions that you care about. So now you can't process any transaction ever without having the current account state of all the people who could be transacting, but you can create blocks with just a few accounts on your phone as a full node in Mina, and you could on Bitcoin if Bitcoin had recursive snarks built into it.
But what if you lose your keys and have to regenerate a wallet? How do you know what how can you replay or reconstruct the state from without having it, without relying on another fuller node?
So in the same way with Bitcoin or any network, if you're starting from zero data, you have to bootstrap, you have to like ask a peer, right? But you don't need historical data if you have recursive proofs that have proven the state transition from the genesis state to the current state. And I guess, yeah, you take the genesis state as a fact, as a starting point.
No, it's a good point. I mean, obviously, well, you want to talk about Mina, so we got to talk about Mina.
I don't want to. We can stop.
No, but it's all. But I guess this is a question. I think it's relevant to the full nodes. Like, what are the node types in Mina, and why do they exist?
Yeah, good question. So, do we really want to make this about Mina? Okay. Yeah. So there's block producer nodes, which like typically have the full account state so that they can process any transactions, and those you can't run on your phone, right? There's nodes in the network that we call snark workers, which are the nodes that are like part of the network that are aggregating those transactions that we were talking about earlier, and then that's all you need for the network to be correct and to run. In practice, if you care about like doing your taxes and things, you actually do want historical data, and so there's an optional node type that actually does record the information, but just in like a dumb database because it doesn't need to be in like a correct blockchain data structure. But it's important to note that those are not sort of important for full node security and for like interacting with a chain at the current state, but in practice sometimes is important for what people want to do.
Why? But well, thank you. But I think it's important to know, and this comes up in rollups too, right? Where it's like, I've lost track of all the different ways we refer to rollups now, but I think of Validium, the idea is that like, well, you just have a proof and like you have nothing else. But theoretically, if you want to like see the actual data that led to the proof, you can go get it somewhere. Is that good enough? I think Satoshi would say it's absolutely not good enough. Satoshi's view would be every client needs access to all the data at all times. They should be running the full node, and they should be able to take any and be able to, to call out any other node that's saying something incorrect.
Yeah.
And then the network itself should aggregate those opinions and then go one way or the other. And that's what Satoshi would say.
All right, we have time for one more. I'm sorry, Brandon. I see you have a question in the back or a comment.
More or less a comment to say something about, I guess, Satoshi. So with Alex, I kind of would have agreed with him. If you look at the basis of where Satoshi decided to build the blockchain for, why he decided to build it, it was kind of the same reasons why America was built on what it was built for. It was the idea that each person has individual freedom, each person has the ability to join in and be a part of things, And so if Satoshi had ZK, would he have used it? I would say no. Because every time you add on an element to something like a free-flowing market space, which is what kind of Bitcoin is, you would have created one more barrier to entry, one more barrier to being used. And his idea was that he wanted to create an entire, I would say, a libertarian almost, free market system that you could trade and work with anyone else you wanted to work with. And so I think that if you look at that and you stick with that, then adding on things, ordinals or anything else like that is outside the scope of that. And I think it makes it an aberration of what the original intent was. It works really well as Bitcoin in a transactional base for whatever you're doing, but beyond that, you start to inhibit it, you start to reduce its ability to function. And that's why I don't think he would have added ZK to it. In addition to that, the transparency is actually pretty critical in the society. If you look at what we do with our justice system or anything else, you need transparency for people to trust it. And so having that transparency also allowed people to see what was happening.
Yeah, I had a Venezuela. I used to work at A16Z, and there was a founder who was doing like a local Bitcoins. Effectively, you don't remember local Bitcoins? It was like a message board where you sold and bought and sold Bitcoins. He was doing a local Bitcoins in Venezuela, and I was just getting into, I guess spoiler alert, I work in a ZK company, so despite everything I've just said, but I was getting ready to go work at Aleo, and I was like, yeah, I think privacy is super important. And he's like, wait, in crypto? I'm like, yeah. Well, like, how do you? I mean, you don't get paid in crypto. He's like, no, I do get paid in crypto. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, why don't you think privacy is important? He's like, the Venezuelan government or the government of where I grew up is just stealing money from everybody constantly and hiding all the ways that they do it. I would way rather have Bitcoin where I can just see straight up there's some accountability there. And I think that's a limited perspective, but it's a very powerful and important perspective, because I think that is actually again, back to this authority. The philosophy of Satoshi was about authority and making sure that no one had privileged information, that everybody had the same information, and that was the basis of the system.
I know I said it was the last, but I see you have the microphone, so let's go for it.
All right, yeah. This is kind of pivoting away from all the conversation we had, but building ZK on Bitcoin. So blockchain is the first application that made the large cost of ZK actually worthwhile. What would you say, more of a theoretical question, what would you say is the first killer app outside of blockchain that can utilize ZK?
Signal doesn't use ZK though, I don't think.
Signal doesn't use ZK, but I think ZK is kind of just broad cryptography technique. We potentially, ZK and TE are most expensive, computationally intensive technique, but I think, for example, Signal is a private messaging P2P platform, and not that I work at Signal or invested in it, but I think that they have been trying to figure out what would be the way to prevent a leaky pattern where P2P message, it will be A to B, but if I message you good night every night, then you can figure out that these two nodes have I guess they know each other, and then they're constantly having daily conversation, and that's already leaky behavior. And then I'm not saying that ZK is a solution to it or TE, but I think, for example, there's oblivious RAM algorithm or a different type of technique that's more production ready, or it's more applicable, that could be useful. And that said, when ZK become a lot more cheaper and easier, more accessible with recursive prover, with aggregation layer, overall, I think that's going to make a lot more consumer-friendly application that's possible. And I think it's very important that all the ZK primitives are being built and explored by all these platforms.
Any other use cases that we want to bring up before we wrap it up?
Yes.
All right, Ming, take us home.
Let me say something directly as the end argument towards Satoshi is that I think Satoshi is fighting a battle for all these nice features of decentralized individual rights and everything, but I think he used the wrong medium. To build a decentralized money is a losing cause because money itself is something that's very centralized. So try to do that. We been through all these years. That's all the struggle is because money itself is centralized. So I think the future would be something like you reverse it, right? You don't rely on a single concept of money, but general purpose computation. So computation can be the kind of power empowers the individuality and individual rights. So I think you can, with that, you can build all kinds of like wallets that's not just dealing with money, but all kinds, like carry all the function that you want in the way you want it as a like sustainable self-contained economy. In that matter, we are promoting something called UVC, Unified Verifiable Computing, which is ZK based. So you have that freedom. You can build a different kind of money or something totally unimaginable. So yeah, that's what I see the future of ZK.
All right, we are right on time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you so much to my debaters, and thank you, everyone, for your very smart questions and comments.